Hello, friends. It's me, Maureen Walbioff, offering up some practical wisdom for nonprofit accidental techies, as I do most Friday afternoons at 12:30 Eastern Time. I missed you last week. I had a great time in New York at the AFP's New York Fundraising Day, but it was weird not to be doing live with you guys. So I'm glad that we're all back here this afternoon, and I've got a really great story to share with you that I think will help you figure out, in the grand scheme of things, is now the time for me to move into a new system? Can I get a little bit more life out of the platform that I'm in right now? Because moving is kind of a pain. Before we jump into this, though, I'm going to tell you that I did have a blast in Manhattan last week. The session was awesome. It was all about the donor journey and some digital engagement tactics to help convert folks from just an email subscriber to a donor, let's say, by creating good engagement pathways and interconnectivity between you and your donor, using digital tactics and some marketing automation. And I hadn't been to a conference for a couple of months, and I was reminded again how great it is to get out of the office. I've said it before that if you don't go to conferences generally, please, please, please give yourself the gift of talking to your boss or yourself if you're in charge of the budget, and give yourself $1,000 a year to go to a conference. It is just eye-opening. It helps you kind of get out of your own way. It gets you out of your own head, and it helps you to talk to people that you don't talk to all the time. So you can reconnect with folks, you can make new friends, and get some new ideas. So I always come back from a conference feeling like super inspired and pumped and kind of jazzed, and it would be awesome if you could feel the same way. So try to go to a conference. I will also say that I'm doing a very special Facebook Live on Friday, July 19th, all about unpacking the mysteries of payment processing. Merchant accounts, gateways, processors. Everybody takes a little slice, right? And most of the time, folks who are in fundraising don't really have a clear picture of what happens really when somebody makes a gift online and that money hitting, some of that money hitting your bank account. So I'm going to be partnering with some folks from Every Action, and we're going to spend probably a half an hour on the 19th of July talking about the mysteries of payment processing and kind of de-jargoning them. We'll have some visual aids too. So if you want to know more about payment processing, come see us on the 19th. And this story today, the stuff we're going to talk about today, should I stay or should I go? Love it or list it? How do I know what the right thing to do is? Kind of came out of the webinar that I did, the Treat Yourself to a New CRM webinar that I did with my client Christina yesterday. It was a blast. We had a full house. People asked really great questions. I'll be uploading that video to my brand new YouTube channel sometime in the next few days, and I'll make sure to put the link below if you missed it or didn't get a chance to register. That way you can still access it. And one of the things that we spent a little bit of time talking about as Christina shared her story of looking for a new CRM and finally making a decision that she was happy with, had to do with the first step that Christina and her team took, which was, do we have to move or not? They actually asked themselves that question, should we stay or should we go? And they decided that they needed to go. But at least they stopped and asked themselves that question. People that I work with, teams that I work with, frequently skip that step and they go right to, I'm moving. The paintings are off the wall. The U-Haul is in the driveway, and we are out of here. And sometimes, hey, Kathy, so great to see you here today. Thanks for coming. Sometimes you do need to move, and it's really clear that you need to move. But other times, maybe you don't. And I'm going to share the story of my friend Dan. Dan is a guy, really smart guy, savvy professional. Ben is here too. We got the 31st Century team rocking out this afternoon. Thanks for coming. Should we stay or should we go? Should we move systems or live with what we have for a little while longer? So Dan is the digital director for a hospital foundation. So he's got a team of about 10 people. He's got some budget, and he's got a unified CRM that his team has been using for about 4 years. And, you know, as these things do, originally, this system seemed like it was a really good fit. They were very confident about moving in and using it. Flash forward 4 years, and people were less thrilled than they had been at the beginning. And that's just kind of human nature, right? But every time Dan talked about digital stuff or about using the system, he was peppered with all these complaints. His team had lots of things that weren't working for them in the system they were using. So Dan started to keep a list. I like Dan, he's very organized. So he started to keep this list of like all the beefs that people had with their system that they were using. And eventually it got to a point of what he felt was unsustainability. Not only were people not happy with how they used the system, but there were starting to be more and more items that he wanted people to do in the system they had that they said, system can't do that, Dan. Great idea, but we cannot execute on that. So eventually he'd sort of had enough, and he decided that he needed to make a plan to move. So he looked at the contract for the system that he was in now and figured out that he was going to re-sign for a year. That would give him enough time to look for a new system, pick one, and move in. Very important. Then he looked at the calendar. And he figured out, all right, it's going to take us probably 3 to 4 months to look around and then 6 months to move. So here's when we're going to start our search. So he made an actual plan and a timeline for himself. Go Dan. And then he set a budget. He decided that he was going to put aside $60,000. Hospital Foundation had that amount of money at his disposal. Not every year, but you know, for special projects, he could come up with that amount of money. So he put $60,000 in the budget to get them moved out. And here's how he divvied that up. He had $20,000 for the new system contract period, including licenses for 8 people on his team. He had another $30,000 in cost to move, right, to do the discovery, to configure the new system, to set up all the forms and email templates and all that stuff and event forms and move their data in and train the team. So that was $30,000. And he had to make sure to keep $10,000 in the budget to pay for his current system while he was going through all that moving stuff. So $60,000 earmarked for this project. And when I talked to Dan, and I was like, go Dan, you know, you made a plan, you have money, you got a vision, awesome. How do you know that you need to move? And that question took him by surprise. He was like, it's a problem. Like, here's my big problem list, right? And so here were a couple of things that he shared with me, just 3 problems that his team was complaining about pretty consistently. Problem number 1 came from Becky. And Becky said, listen, Dan, it should not take me this much time to build and send an email message. It's ridiculous. There's got to be other systems out there that let me do this more quickly and more efficiently. So that was Becky's problem, one of the things on that list. Susan, her complaint had to do with reports. Reports are so hard to run. We're putting all this data in the system. It's impossible to get the data out. You know, it takes up way too much of my time, and it's not intuitive. So that was Susan's deal. And then Blaine, the database administrator, his complaint always was, the database is a mess. Our data is a mess. I can't find anything. I have to look in 3 places to find notes about stuff. We gotta get out of here. A new system is actually going to be set up better, and it'll do a better job of keeping our data clean. So that's pretty common right? And Dan probably had 25 more things on the list. But when we looked at that list, and I said, you might want to categorize these things, because right now it's just a general grumble list of grievances. What do you think the root cause of some of these issues might be? Is it the fact that you don't have a plan? One of those 4 Ps. It might be your platform. It could be a people issue. And it could also have to do with your business processes. So do yourself a favor and just look at that list a little bit. And, we kind of did that together. And so here's what really might be going on for Becky, Susan, and Blaine and their grudges that they've got against the system that they're using now. Becky's little thing about shouldn't take me this long to send an email message, for goodness sake, takes me 2 hours to do. Becky's been there for 5 months and has never been trained. Becky was given a login and thoughts and prayers. Becky went in and stabbed her way around and kind of figured out how to build and send an email. Not well, not the most efficient way to do it. Maybe she's doing the steps in the wrong order. Not necessarily move solution, immediate move solution. Training on a new system would certainly help her use it more efficiently, but it's not the tools problem that Becky didn't get training. So that's Becky's deal. Let's talk about Susan and her report problem. So hard to run reports. What Susan really meant when she said that over and over again was that at least a couple times a week, probably more at different times of the year, people were running into her office with ad hoc report requests. Susan, I need, donors who gave last year but not this year, who were also members who have an annual giving level of less than $1,000. It would take me forever to sort of set up the filters to run like a really precise ad hoc report like that. And if you get enough of those requests, unplanned requests for complicated reports, of course it's going to take a lot of time. And of course you're going to feel like, you're trying to run a query. Nope, that's not what they wanted. Let me change this part of the query. Nope, that's still not what they wanted. Road to nowhere, right? The team, Dan's team, didn't have agreements about what data they needed to look at and how often they needed to look at it, what that data really was, and who needed to see it. So if they had those agreements in place, then Susan could set those reports up and have them maybe even auto run and get emailed to the people who need to see them, or have them run and display on a dashboard for a little bit of data visualization. So that's like pretty common database functionality, folks. So it wasn't that the reports were hard to run, although they were probably complicated. They just were, every 5 minutes she needed to run a new report, never to be run again. So she would finally get that query right. Nobody would ever ask her for that exact set of information again. Super frustrating. Let's talk about Blaine and his messy database, right? I'm sure all of you have been Blaine. You might have said it even before watching this live today. Like, our database is gross. It's like a junk drawer. It's a mess. I can't find anything. And if you have more than one database, that just exponentially compounds the annoyance factor. So let's look at Blaine's problem. If you've got 2 records, and you got to do a lot of merge purging or dupe management. Sometimes that does take a human pair of eyes to decide if this is the same record or a different record. Sometimes that certainly can be caused by end users, right? Your supporters who make a gift with their work email address and then buy event tickets with their Gmail address. That stuff is going to happen. And so you got to have a process in place for dealing with that. That's not the system's problem. But even if it was the system's problem, like let's say there was a connector in place and it's throwing duplicates, sending data back and forth between point A and point B, that's something that can be fixed. Dan's team had a unified CRM though, so it was all one product. There was no connector, which made us really quickly realize that it's more likely that Blaine's problem is related to the humans who are actually entering that data. Blaine maybe is the database administrator, right? They're going to use it perfectly according to the best practice rules all the time. Generally, database administrators hold themselves to a very high standard. Data integrity is important to them, personally and professionally. So Blaine made sure that, if a checkbox needed to be checked, it was checked. An abbreviation for something was always used the same way, but everybody else wasn't following the Blaine way. So some people were putting notes about interactions on the attributes tab, and some were putting them in the notes field, and none of that stuff is searchable. Right? If something's in an open text field, you are unlikely to be able to search for it or report on it. So was it the CRM at the root cause of Blaine's problem? Maybe the data just needs to be reconfigured. 4 years is a long time. Maybe they've got new programs that they didn't have when they first moved into the database, and they've been sort of hacking their way and using fields that weren't intended for that information. Address too, we've all stuck stuff into fields that really weren't designed for the information that was going in there. So, it's true for Dan and his team that a move could theoretically solve all of the 23 issues on his problem list. But let's face it, it's expensive to move. It's a pain to move. You can't work on other major projects or programs while you're focused on moving your CRM or your donor database. What if Dan could invest $50,000 of the $60,000 he put aside for a move into fixing those issues, into training Becky so she could build emails quickly and confidently? What if he invested some of that money in creating some new custom reports and setting up some automation around running and delivering them with an expert? Pay somebody to do it for you. Maybe some data hygiene or some updating of the database fields or the way that the data is organized. $50,000 to love the system that you have, to invest in staying where you are for a few more years, goes a lot further, can get you a lot more than $60,000 can kind of move you into a new database and kind of hope for the best and start all over again. So, he might still need to move, but maybe not right away. He'll definitely experience, and so will his team, improvements. We're going to start all over with a brand new problem list, you guys. We have knocked all these off. Makes you feel like you got something done, right? This was a problem, and now it is fixed. I didn't need to move because my sink is leaking. There's a good analogy for that. Don't be so quick to toss your current system into the bin. Maybe you do need to move, but do the due diligence of figuring out what your problem list really is, categorizing those problems by what their root cause might be: plan, platform, people, process. And then you'll know what the solution should be. And maybe it is moving, but maybe it's not moving right away. And if Dan had $60K to play with, and he only spends 45 or 50 really polishing up the system he has, empowering his team through training and support, he can use that extra $10,000 to send them all to conferences. So there you go. Everybody wins. They come back with fresh ideas that they can use in the system. They didn't need to deal with a huge learning curve to learn how to use a new product. It is win, win, win. So I hope this is helpful. I'd love to hear comments. Chat it in whenever you're watching this video. Did you realize too late that you moved and you dragged your leaky sink with you into your new house? Or are you sort of stuck? I don't know if I should move or invest in the system that I have now and fixing some of the problems that you're experiencing. It can be a knife edge to kind of sit on, like, ooh, I don't want to spend $50,000 the wrong way. So I'd love to hear your questions about this. I'd love to hear, Ben says reinvestment versus new investment in technology. There are pros and cons to each thing. And you need to be really clear. It's as important as picking the right replacement system. Being really clear about what you're trying to do through a move. You know, don't put your team through that. Don't put yourself through that if you don't have to. Not every system issue can be solved with reinvestment. So if you've outgrown a system or there's a bad business relationship, you don't trust the folks that you're partnering with, maybe they're not updating the system or you've got some other problems, then yeah, moving, you might need to do it. Kristen is here. Okay, Kristen Burnett-Gassick, you deal with technology all the time. Do you recommend that that your clients or folks that you work with try to reinvest in the systems that they've got, or move to a new system? I would love to know, because you float in these waters too, my friend. Next week, though, as people are thinking about their comments, next week we're going to talk about getting references from your new software vendor. We always, or should be always, checking references when we hire a new staff person, or a pet sitter, you know, or somebody that we want to make sure is going to do a good job for us, is reliable, etc. But when it comes to talking to references, folks who are using the system that you are contemplating moving to can feel a little lost, like, what should I ask, and how many references should I talk to, and what should those conversations go like? So that is another thing that we talked about on that Treat Yourself to a New CRM webinar yesterday, and I thought it was a good thing to sort of tease out in a Facebook Live here. So it is the end of our time together. Should you love it? Should you list it? Hopefully this video will give you some tips to figure that out. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday and an awesome weekend. Summer started today. I'm feeling it a little bit. I hope you are too. And I will look forward to seeing you next Friday as we talk about references for software vendors at 12:30 Eastern. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.